Here is how you can start your first Airbnb just like myself with $0 in the bank account, just an idea and a very clear steps of implementation to get you there. Today we'll be learning the secrets of starting an Airbnb business from zero to a full-time income. You'll be learning the secrets on starting an Airbnb business with zero cash to a full-time income just like I did. Today I'll be taking you through my personal journey of how I became an Airbnb millionaire starting from scratch and how you can do it too. But let me rewind the clock and bring you back to basics. I knew absolutely nothing at all. I'd purchased one property before I started my first Airbnb, and that was just a standard house. I then went out to embark to buy a block of units. I'd saved up my money, I had a great real estate strategy, but I still had no experience on how to modify a property. I had no experience on how to run a real estate business or Airbnb business, and most importantly, I had no skills on how to actually run the day-to-day cleaning, how to communicate with people, and more importantly, how to actually accept people's money to stay in my place. It brings us back to the main important point. How did I even get started in the first place? Well, it was quite simple. The property that I was purchasing at the time already had an active Airbnb, so it kind of just fell into my lap. And I thought to myself, how do I now take on this property, start a fresh new Airbnb account, and ensure that I can live up to the expectations? The first thing I did was I spoke to the host that I was actually purchasing the property over. And I actually asked him, what do you do? What do you message? How do you charge? And who are your cleaners? He took me out for a coffee one day, he sat me down, and I looked at him in the eye. And I automatically gained a high level of confidence because I said, look, this guy is on the way out, he wants to retire, he's a lot slower than me, he doesn't know how to use technology, and on top of that, he was the one teaching me how to use automations and how to create text templates, and most importantly, how to engage his cleaners and automate them as well. So I thought, if he can do it, I can do it 10 times faster. So once I learned the process, I took down all my notes that day and I found out, number one, what type of applications I'll be using. Number two, how I'm gonna charge this. And number three, how to set up my first Airbnb account and property, which he had already set up from scratch. The easiest part of this whole process was first accepting the fact that I was going to launch my first Airbnb. And this is where I want to take you guys to first. As the first point, if you are going to look to start your first Airbnb, you need to 100% commit to it. You can start with zero cash for sure. You can also start with zero experience. However, as long as you have the blueprint, which I'll be showing you today from start to finish on how to launch your first property, on how to start with zero cash, and how to start collecting those payments from Airbnb, you'll have everything that you need to know to embark on the journey. Where I am today is now I've launched 11 Airbnbs across Australia, and Australian market's great because if you position the Airbnbs correctly, the cash flow is extremely high from each of those Airbnbs. It's quite easy once you do your first or your second Airbnb to multiply that process and scale that opportunity to a 7-figure business. Yes, you heard it here first, a 7-figure business. More income than people can earn from their 9-to-5 job. I've successfully done it and it feels like it's my duty. If I don't tell you this information, nobody else will. So to get us started, all I simply did was wrote down my applications, and here they are. Here's 3 simple applications you can get started with to launch your first Airbnb. The first one that I utilize is IGMS. This is an easy application that tracks all your calendars for your Airbnb, and if you're getting started with one, all you need to do is plug in the text templates that will automatically message your guests, keep them informed, and give them the house manuals. The second application that I use is Beyond Pricing. It's an AI integrated pricing mechanism which allows your property to be the most attractive, the cheapest, but also the most booked on the market. And the final application that I utilize for Airbnb is ECP Photo. The photos need to pop and make a mark every time the guest rolls onto your Airbnb profile and your listing. So ECP Photo allows for great exposure and a very crisp quality image, also allowing you to show aerial shots, drawing circles on them to show and verify the location of your Airbnb as well. Once you have accepted the fact that you will be launching your first Airbnb, the next most important step for you is to understand the basics of Airbnb. And in order to do this, it's very relevant to understand what people are looking for, how long do they want it for, and how is it monetized for your best bang for buck. The way I did this was I broke down my first Airbnb property and realized people were looking for an easy to access, no frills, no drag, and most importantly, no stress stay. And how I realized this was the amount of booking volume we were getting for a studio apartment to start off. Now, it's quite a small space and it was intimately designed. And the basics of Airbnb allows people to check in at any time they want, minimal communication, and to follow easy steps to access the property and understand what's around the property. What is the value of Airbnb and why are we actually exploring this information? Airbnb allows you to monetize a space, and the value of Airbnb is it's usually cheaper than a hotel. That's the basics of Airbnb, and it allows you to actually scale this. So as long as you're cheaper, as long as you make it easy to access and easy to understand, offer a very inviting space in a good location, I see more value in this Airbnb rather than booking this hotel that's going to cost me twice as much. So to summarize, the basics of Airbnb is as long as you can be cheaper, offer an inviting space which is high quality, and offer minimal drag, you will be on your first steps to launching your first Airbnb from the most fundamental layer. After you understand the fundamentals of Airbnb and short-term letting, taking your first steps to having your first booking is the most critical part of the process. And let me say this from personal experience. It took a lot of resilience and determination because your first time is definitely the hardest. You will forget to put the kitchen items in. You will forget on how to design the room correctly, and you will forget the most basic toiletries. So having a very simplified list on what people would require during your stay would be the best first starting point. The second most important factor after you've developed your lists is to allow easy to entry process, like I mentioned from the fundamentals earlier. This includes a lockbox, this includes a backup option if the lockbox is failing, and finally, the most important step of the experience that a guest will have is to allow them to actually have freedom in what they want to do inside that property. And this could mean they could have relaxation, this could mean they could have an activity or workspace, or more importantly, they might want to come in and do some cooking for their loved one. So providing a creative space which is versatile enough and a clean layout is very important to your first Airbnb bookings. For us, what I learned the best, and this is an added bonus as part of your first steps to your Airbnb booking, enabling the guests to have a wow factor with something they weren't expecting. And what we do is providing a cheap bottle of wine, which won't break your back pocket, however, be an added gesture with a little personal note to say, hey, this is from me to you, something that you won't expect. Adding chocolates, adding coffee, adding anything that the guests will consume to really have that wow factor initially when they first walk in is a very important factor. The next factor is smell. We really highlight smell when entering any Airbnb property we have. The reason being is smell exudes emotion, and emotion is what lasts in someone's mind and memory. So allowing the smell to be prolific inside your Airbnb property will definitely allow you to stand out, but number one, evict and evoke that emotion that you're looking for to go, wow, this is such a clean space. And finally, the lighting. It's important that your lighting matches your photos. Earlier, I gave you a tip in regards to how to edit your photos or a cool app that you could use to stand out. You want to ensure that that lighting is actually relevant, and the lighting when the guest checks in is ready to go as well. The way you could do this is during the daytime, if you have ways to open the blinds, allow natural lighting to come in, but also maybe leave 1 or 2 lights on with your cleaning team. That could definitely help with your first few bookings. The second thing that you could use if it's a night check-in is ensuring the lights are all kept on outside and inside, so it's an easy, smooth process for your first few bookings. The main thing and the last summary of this chapter for your first Airbnb booking is to ensure you have a 5-star stay. Airbnb ranks your property based on how it's ranking based on reviews. And if you can have a 5-star stay for your first 3, you will rank high on the algorithms for Airbnb as a preferred option when people are looking for this. And if you plug in my first initial steps, just beyond pricing, to allow you to be the cheapest and the most attractive property option, you will be booked pretty much all the time. Be very clear on how you give your instructions on IGMS, and be very clear on the house manuals you provide. A quick tip to get you started as well as a triple bonus part of this segment of the video is to allow everyone to access the manual whenever they like with a shortened URL to go to a Google Drive that you create as a PDF as a nice and easy presentable manual. If you need assistance with this, you can utilize artificial intelligence to create your manuals, to provide them in a presentable manner and easy to understand manner, alongside photos of the lockboxes, of the front door, of the driveway, so everyone knows exactly where they should be parking, exactly where they enter, exactly exactly what the lockbox looks like and exactly where things are inside the Airbnb. These first few steps should allow you to launch your first Airbnb quite smoothly and also have confidence that you'll get those 5-star reviews so you can rank nice and high in the Airbnb algorithm. A lot of people have asked me, how did I scale an Airbnb business? Yes, it might be easy to start your first one, and yes, it might be easy to manage because you can look at that calendar all day long. But how do you go from 1 to 5? How do you go from 5 to 10? They're the steps that I took to ensure that I could scale to a 7-figure Airbnb business. Now, it's quite easy when we break it down, and today in this part, I'll be breaking down exactly how I went from 1 to 5 Airbnbs as the most initial step. When you're now scaling an Airbnb business, let's think about the main operations you will have as part of that business operation. Number 1, someone or yourself might be assisting with messaging or ad hoc questions which may arise from guests. You can even use yourself or start to train someone, and an easy way to do this is a relative, someone that you trust. You can give them a few hours, or you can look offshore for a cheaper option to train them up and give them the adequate responses. The second main operation of an Airbnb is your cleaning team. You need them to be prompt, consistent, and never let you down. The way I scaled my cleaning team, I'll take you through in the next few moments after I can break down the key steps to allow you to scale. And the third most important operation as part of your Airbnb is your maintenance team. Just remember, there's a clear difference between maintenance and cleaning. And a lot of time, your cleaners will not be able to maintain things that break down or that are out of place at your Airbnb property. This includes landscaping. So it's important to have a great maintenance team that you can count on, or that do visit the property on an interval basis. That way, you know things are kept up to date consistently and you can manage your cash flow accordingly. Now, how did I scale from 1 Airbnb to 5? The easiest way to do this is if you've set up those core operations which I just mentioned, try and look for Airbnb options in that region. Whether you're going to own the property or rent the property, that's a conversation for another time, and I can take you through all the steps you might need to know to rent your first Airbnb property. However, if you've got one and you want to multiply in that region, you can scale those 3 key operations in your region to quickly get to 5. And I'm sure your cleaning team, your maintenance team, your friend or relative, or your offshore person, or even yourself would be happy to pick up the same amount of work, just multiplied across 5 properties in the same region, giving out the same advice. So an easy way to now do this is look for opportunities. And the way I did it was I did it in the same unit block where I already had one. My biggest fear. What was my biggest fear from doing this was I thought my Airbnbs would compete against each other. Genuinely. I had 5 1-bedroom apartments in the same block and I put them all up against one another. The way I overcame this is I went for 5 individual themes. And that's the beauty about Airbnb. You can create a creative space for yourself to ensure you can scale your portfolio even with the same cleaning team, even with the same landscaping team, and more importantly, even with the same unit structure that you're offering out. Here's an added bonus as part of this section. I did this so easily where we created a beach theme, we created a couples theme, we created a loft theme, we created a New York theme, we created a Mexico theme, and we created a siesta relax theme as well. And there were nice, easy themes that we could roll out very, very simply. We just changed the color textures, the type of furniture in each of them, and overall the experience, even with smell, as the people walk into their new Airbnb. Now, scaling my Airbnb portfolio from $0 cash with zero understanding to a 7-figure portfolio was an exciting process. But I really want to be honest to you, and as I said, everyone is happy to give out some information, but no one's going to tell you what I'm going to tell you today. And the reality is that I did run into roadblocks, and I did run into periods of stress and periods of worry, and that came with legalities and taxation. A lot of us don't expect to achieve success really quickly, and more importantly, the legalities behind running a very successful business, which is extremely profitable and making an impact in your community. The ways I uncovered what these hurdles were was by chance and by people messaging me on Airbnb and Airbnb themselves. And what this was the legalities of running an Airbnb in your local community. And a lot of the time, the local government laws may restrict you from running an Airbnb for an extended period of time, running an Airbnb in its surrounding environment, or more importantly, running multiple Airbnbs from the same property. It's very important to check before you run your Airbnb the legal laws based on your state or local community. The second is important that you apply for any short-term rental rental obligations or certifications that you need to run a short-term property. And what I had to do was understand the state laws here on registering a short-term property as part of the government, to then link that with Airbnb to ensure that we met all legal requirements. This was a very difficult process for me, as I was unsure on how to do this, not only on one, but the first 5 that I launched. And it did take a few hurdles on my end to understand the process and how I needed to comply to do this. What I simply did was conducted my research. I also reached out to a local and state law expert, and finally I applied for those certifications by providing the necessary documentation to ensure that I could display that I was the host and the owner of that property. Once I could overcome this was quite an easy process, and now I can meet these regulations in the space of minutes when I am launching a new Airbnb. So it's very important that you understand the process in your local area and region. The second most important part is taxation. Your taxation laws may impact the way you can run your Airbnb. A lot of the time it's important to realize that your Airbnb is income, and this is taxable income depending on where you live, where you reside, or where you run your business. For me, we had to set up a company to ensure that the Airbnb was run by a company and it met all taxation obligations from costs, expenses, income, and also reporting this adequately as part of the taxation laws here. This was a whole new process because I had to engage a different accountant, I had to understand the obligations running an Airbnb, and most importantly, I had to tie this into how the property and the asset was run overall, and if the asset was going to also accumulate a rental income from running the Airbnbs in them. So it's important from a legal and taxation standpoint, you meet these obligations before you start your Airbnb. This will offer you a lot less stress, a lot less hurdles, especially from the experience that I had when I launched my Airbnbs from 1 to 5 in these initial processes. Success stories and success with Airbnb is a real thing, and I saw this happen in my own personal circumstances as well. In the local region where I launched my first 5 Airbnbs, I had a friend who just built their first home, and once they realized the success that I had, their new Airbnb that they launched was only 5 minutes away from the 5 Airbnbs that I had. On the plus side, they actually had a house that they were putting on, so they had their own apprehensions compared to the apartments that I listed on Airbnb. But let me take you through their success story. So I had a friend, he had a property, he built a house on it, and he spent over $1 million building this home. The downside was he was living in this home. However, after seeing the success, we broke down how much income he could make per night from his home right next to the beach. And he had the idea, if he put it on a standard rental, on a long-term rental, he'd make $1,000 a week. On Airbnb, he could make between $550 per night to $700 per night based on how premium the property was right next to the beach. And what happened next? Just before Christmas of 2023, he took the opportunity to launch his first Airbnb. He followed the formula of the platforms we utilized, the templates we utilized, the pricing structure we utilized, how easy the check-in process was, and more importantly, the experience from parking to entry to living in that Airbnb and checking out. The success he had was he generated $20,000 in the space of 1 to 2 months whilst having this property over the Christmas period, and this genuinely changed his life and his outcome of what he would achieve from that property. If we were going to break that down further, that's almost half a year of rental income he generated in the space of 4 to 6 weeks to allow him to launch a new platform for more Airbnbs and more properties, just like he did for the first one. And these success stories allow me to believe, it doesn't matter what your circumstances are, it doesn't matter if you have a house, zero money, there is so many ways you can start from where you are right now to launch your first Airbnb. And a lot of the time, if I'm going to tell you straight, the main thing that's stopping you is your mindset and your beliefs. However, if you can ensure and understand that it is possible, it doesn't matter what your circumstances are, and you follow these simple steps, you can launch your first 5, your first 10 Airbnbs risk-free to ensure you calculate every single step properly and ensure that you have a great long-term outcome in a successful business like myself and the other people that I've also seen launch successful businesses. So good luck. Now, taking you to the next step is understanding where the opportunities are in the current market. And property is an interesting game, and so is Airbnb. I've studied the market in great detail to ensure what's going to be successful for me. And like I said, if no one's going to tell you this information, I want to be able to tell you this right now. It's important to understand what type of people are going to be on Airbnb looking for your property. In today's climate, finances are changing so much. Some people have more money and some people aren't as fortunate to have that much money. The easiest way to be successful in Airbnb is don't overcompensate, don't overcomplicate, and don't overthink. Ensuring that you're creating a property for the average income earner is so important for Airbnb because it becomes affordable, it becomes accessible, and more importantly, it becomes extremely popular with a high volume of bookings. So here's my best advice. If you can look for a property which is small in nature, usually a 1-bedroom is perfect to start off with because the price point and the entry point into this Airbnb market is extremely easy for the end consumer, which is the guest. Additionally, this offers an attractive price point for yourself to ensure that even if you place your property on the Airbnb market for $100 per night, you would walk away with $700 at the end of the week, guaranteed, and that includes weekends. And I can ensure you will be the cheapest Airbnb property out there and you'll still be extremely profitable. Additional to this, it doesn't matter where interest rates will go, it doesn't matter if people will run out of money. Ensuring that you're meeting this criteria, aiming for the middle of the market, you will enable yourself to be so attractive that it's undeniable. If people can't afford hotels tomorrow, if people want a quick getaway, if people want somewhere accessible by the coast, you will be that person everyone will go to. This does open up another conversation for us in a future video. Setting up the Airbnb for this market is critical, and you might be thinking, what is the startup costs? Well guys, it's fairly simple. If you're aiming for the middle of the market, you'll also provide them the middle of the market so they're used to this type of furnishings and finishes as well. I'll take you to the step-by-steps on how to set up your first Airbnb to ensure you're profitable at another time. But as long as you're focusing on these key steps to understand where to place your Airbnb, how big your Airbnb should be, what price point you should come in at, you will definitely be successful in any opportunity you choose for your first and multiple Airbnbs. And there you have it. You have all the simple steps you need to first start your Airbnb, to start with zero money up front, to understand what tools you need, to understand how to be successful, and also where to look for your next opportunity. For us, join our community, hit that subscribe button. We're going to be sharing tips and tricks, but more importantly, grow together. There's no sales here, guys. We're just in it to win it. I'll see you soon in the next video.